Mark Hale for the New York Post here, and today we're going to be discussing the Yankees with our terrific baseball columnist, my friend and teammate, Joel Sherman. And Joel, let's start with Derek Jeter here. The Yankees tonight are going to open a series in Texas against the Rangers. It's where they ended last season in the ALCS, where Jeter was outplayed by the Rangers shortstop Elvis Andrus. And now to start this season, Jeter is off to a terrible start 1 month into the year. So let me ask you, at this point, do you believe in your mind that Jeter can still recover and be an effective and useful player for the Yankees?
Yeah, I think it's a big question around the team because it's not just any player, Mark. It's the captain of the team. It's one of the great icons in the history of the iconic franchise. And they just signed him to a 3-year extension. Right. And I think you hit on something when you set this up, is last year in the postseason, Elvis Andrus versus Derek Jeter looked like the 1996 ALCS when it was a 21-year-old Derek Jeter versus Cal Ripken, a fading star whose fade began to really hurt the Baltimore Orioles. And the Yankees have to wonder just how much do they allow Jeter to take them down. You know, I've heard a lot of theories so far this season. Well, they're still winning, so what's it matter if he's struggling? And I always feel, I remember Mike D'Antoni saying recently with the Knicks that there was some stuff early on with Carmelo Anthony when they were winning that he didn't clean up because they were winning and he regretted not cleaning it up. And I think that this is not something you keep tabling and tabling. And you know, I know why the Yankees want to table it. It's Derek Jeter. You don't want to embarrass him before his 3,000th hit. You never want to embarrass him because of who he is. But the reality is you can't have a guy with a sub-300 on-base percentage hitting at the top of the lineup. And so the first move has to be towards the bottom of the lineup. And when is that going to occur? I think probably sometime shortly after his 3,000th hit, unless the warm weather heats up his bat.
Interesting. Okay. So maybe after the 3,000th hit. Well, that could be around when Phil Hughes, Joel, is getting set to return to the team, if all goes well. Brian Cashman saying that Hughes is going to rest for 2 weeks, then begin throwing, and maybe in 6 or 8 weeks he can be back on a mound. But, Joel, you think that Hughes could potentially be an important second-half guy for this team, don't you?
I do, you know, but of course it would mean staying on some path to recovery.
Right.
And I would say right now the odds are not great for that, Mark, simply because at this moment there's still no diagnosis. He didn't have this vascular circulatory problem, which is kind of good news, but the bad news is no examination has figured out where a 24-year-old's fastball has gone. And unless it suddenly reappears, you know, the only way to know for sure is to go in there and do some, you know, open up his shoulder and go look at it, which is, of course, no one wants to do that because then you're talking about a significantly longer period of time he'd be out. But if you want to paint the rosiest scenario, you know, you could imagine 8 weeks from now, the expiration date on someone, Freddie Garcia, Bartolo Colon, both of whom have been revelations, but both of whom have had long injury histories. Bartolo Colon hasn't thrown more than 100 innings in the major leagues since he won the Cy Young in 2005. So if the Yankees would sign up to have the full Phil Hughes back on, say, August 1st, if they could get him, because they'll know they need him. Because when you think about it, Mark, there's kind of 3 ways the Yankees can address what is probably going to be their weakness in the long run, which is their rotation. They can get somebody from the minor leagues, a Manny Banuelos, Adele and Betanzas are the highest ceilings guys, or, you know, maybe an Adam Warren, who they personally like, a trade by using some of those chits. But it's hard to see who that's going to be. It's probably not going to be Felix Hernandez, who everyone's talking up the most. Seattle's playing better, and it would be hard for the Mariners to give up on Felix Hernandez now when their fan base is already disillusioned. And the third way is a unique way, which is Phil Hughes, who's kind of a middle ground. He's not a prospect anymore, not a veteran. You know, can he come back and help? And if he can, that would, you know, really change the dynamic here for them because it would be something found at about the midway to 2/3 point of the season.
Interesting. Okay. Let's move on to Alex Rodriguez, Joel, who entered yesterday's series finale against the Tigers in a pretty bad slump. He was 4 for 50, and really kind of, you know, in your mind, it seems to be showing how valuable A-Rod is to this lineup. They can't really afford to have him slump because it really affects the entire dynamic of that batting order, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know, I wrote something earlier this year. You know, Robinson Cano finished 3rd in the MVP last year. You know, Alex Rodriguez, in a quote-unquote bad year, hit more homers and drove in more runs than Robinson Cano, who was unquestionably the MVP of the team and almost the MVP of the whole American League. And yet, in a down year, Alex Rodriguez outperformed him and kind of was trying to bet with Cano, when things were going bad for him early in the year. Come on, bet me. We'll see who finishes with more homers and RBIs. And it just reinforces what a talented guy A-Rod is. And when you've watched the Yankees recently as he's struggled, especially because there's other struggles in the lineup, Jorge Posada, Derek Jeter, some other elements, when he, even at this date, when he does not perform, the offense really takes a step or two back. And his importance to the team cannot be overstated.
Last question for you, Joel, is tonight to start in Texas will be Ivan Nova. He's actually coming off two pretty good outings for this team, and I'm wondering, do you kind of see this as the evolution of a young pitcher?
Yeah, it's always tricky with young pitchers, Mark. At this time last year, if you asked me that question about Phil Hughes, who was off to a hot start, who was in the midst of a run that would lead him to the All-Star game, I probably would have said, yep, look, this is exactly what the Yankees had hoped for. They didn't include Phil Hughes in the trade for Johan Santana. That was, something they were getting, screamed at by their fans, the media, go do this. And so young pitching is tricky. Pitching in general is tricky. Young pitching is tricky to know what's going to happen from day to day, week to week, year to year. But Nova has legitimate mid-rotation stuff. And the question has been, does he have enough of a repertoire to navigate around a lineup 2 or 3 times? And with the evolution of his curveball, which Freddie Garcia has helped him with, Freddie Garcia has him there. They play catch together every day. You kind of choose a partner in spring training, and that's pretty much the guy you play catch with the whole way. And Garcia convinced him recently, don't just play catch to play catch. Do it for meaning. And he had him start throwing curveballs, 40, 50 curveballs as part of this game of catch, with the point being, you should be able to throw a curveball if you feel that's the key pitch. And Nova told Garcia, this is my key pitch. You should be able to throw it 2-0 for a strike when you need it. And Ivan Nova, if you've noticed, in especially these last 2 starts, he's throwing 50% more curveballs than he did in his first 3 or 4 starts, and the accuracy and the impact and the success of it is much greater. If that pitch is there for him, I think he's a legitimate number 4, maybe even a number 3 starter in the American League.
Wow, interesting. Well, that was Joel Sherman on the Yankees. There's plenty more from Joel to come this season, and you can follow his thoughts on the Yankees, the Mets, and all of Major League Baseball on Twitter at Joel Sherman #1, Joel Sherman 1 on Twitter. Thanks to Joel, and for the New York Post, I'm Mark Hale.